Hello, fellow YouTubers and other future Card Buddy fighters. Sorry I had to re-record this Skull Warrior deck profile. For some reason, the first recording got corrupt about halfway through, and it worked fine on my phone, but no matter how many times I uploaded it to YouTube, it just would not work. So I just decided to re-record this, and there's quite a bit of stuttering just from me trying to get my thoughts together. So I figured a better, well presented video would work. So the first is the buddy, Demon Kid Maru. He's a 6/2/1 size 1 Skull Warrior, and when he is called from the drop zone, put the top card of your deck into your gauge. At the end of the turn, you destroy him. I chose him as buddy because he is a monster I feel, first off, you should run 4 of in pretty much any Skull Warrior size 1 related deck. Heck, probably even off size. Anything other than the size 3/1 build, I still feel like you could probably use him in some way, shape, or form. But he's good as buddy because first off, he's free. Second off, he should be a 4 of because there is no reason not to run him as a 4 of. Plus there's a little bit of strategy with this deck, and this sort of helps to mask your strategy, and actually kind of helps make your deck function, I don't know how to describe it, more fluidly, I guess, without conflict of interest is probably the best way to put it. But let's move on here. First off is obviously for Demon Kid Maru's. So we'll just move on from that. Next is for Godly Speed Natsubame's. It's a 4/2/1 size 1. Its ability is Sandy Sprint. When it enters the field from the drop zone, if you have another Skull Warrior on your field, you draw a card. And Sandy Sprint only activates once per turn. At the end of the turn, you destroy this card. So it's a named ability only once per turn. So once you call him once from the drop zone, that's when the ability activates. Whether you actually have another Skull Warrior on the field or not, it still will activate. So if you do resurrect him with an empty field, and he's the first one with, like, let's say, Return to the Underworld, his ability will activate and you just won't draw. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to set up your board, because people can try to counter-destroy the other Skull Warrior on the field to keep you from drawing with this one when you go to resurrect him. But, I mean, he's still just a staple 4 of, just because it's essentially a free draw. He just complements really well with the rest of the deck, and he's just grown to be one of those core cards in Skull Warriors. Next is for Snake Princess Setsuna's. She's a 3/1/1 size 1, and when she enters the field, if you may pay a gauge. If you do, call a size 1 or less Skull Warrior from your drop by paying its call cost. And at the end of the turn, she self-destructs. So, obviously, the point of her is to either call back Natsubame or Maru. So if you call Natsubame back for a gauge, you get a free draw. I should move the cards up a little bit more up here. There we go. If you call Natsubame, you get a free draw. If you call Maru, then he's just a free monster. The gauge you use for her just comes back with his ability. So, and then also it works well with some spells in the deck as well, which I'll get to. The next size 1 is Undying Benishojo. He's a 5/2/1 act. If this card is in your drop zone, you can pay a gauge, and if you do, call him from your drop zone, and then he self-destructs at the end of the turn. I only run him as a 2 of because he does eat a lot of gauge if you try to constantly recall him from the drop zone. And usually there's better options other than him, with the whole strategy I just pointed out with Setsuna, Natsubame, and Maru. But this is kind of just like a backup card. If you're really just in a tight pinch and you just need a monster on the field to try to finish a game. It's happened to me a handful of times, so it does happen once in a while. But he's really nice with the new Kagan Ryu, which I'll get to once I get there. But he's nice because he's just one gauge to get a monster on the field. Next is one of the newer Yamis, Yamagitsune Hidden in Dark Garments. It's a Darkness Dragon World and Katana World dual monster. It's a 5/2/1 size 1, and its call cost is pay 1 gauge and 1 life. When a monster item on your field deals damage to your opponent, you may destroy it, and if you do, you gain a life and draw a card. So he's a kind of a pseudo upgrade from Evil and Hearts Yamagitsune. Really, the only difference is the the extra one life for his call cost. But obviously, in exchange, you can potentially get that one life back with destroying a Skull Warrior or a monster or an item. One nice thing about this, though, is I do run Return to the Underworld, so with the Return to the Underworld, you don't have to pay his call cost, so with that, basically all the life gain you would gain would be free if you resurrected Yami here. So yeah, he's a pseudo upgrade. Obviously, if he's from hand, it's not an exact straight upgrade, but if you Return to the Underworld him, which is pretty common and frequent, then that's pretty much an upgrade in my book. Next is the other half of the duality of this deck that I was mentioning earlier is the 6/2/1 Master Clown Dark Fox. He's a size 1 that you pay 1 gauge to call him, and at the end of the battle that a Skull Warrior Adventure on your field attacked, you choose a monster on your opponent's field, and you may destroy a monster on your field. If you do, you put a soul from the card that's on your opponent's field. Just trying to clarify because there's a lot of pointing on this. But if you do, you put a soul of a chosen card into the drop zone and then destroy it. So, this is what I kind of mean by the duality of the deck is the two different Yamis. One, they each work in their own way. If I can grab all 4 of the dang cards. Hidden in Garments is better for open center decks like Dragon World or just any deck that really probably doesn't have a lot of monsters on the field or, relies on an open center. Dark Fox is better for closed center and quite literally any closed center, other than maybe Prism Dragons. But this card is just nasty that I can just tear through walls pretty easily. And it makes your opponent have to keep forcing to keep rebuilding their field. And sometimes they just don't have that luxury because the deck tends to put a big monster on the field and then expect it to take a turn or two to actually break through it if they don't already have like shields to stop the attacks from destroying the monster. So just the fact that you can just swing with any monster, any Skull Warrior, which is obviously literally the whole deck, and remove a soul and destroy, that just kind of makes shields kind of useless because you don't actually need to match the power. You just need to swing and just kill them. And you just, destroy the monster and you remove a soul and destroy. Or if it can't be destroyed, then you just remove the soul, which is still a win in my book. Next are the size 3s in the deck. First is Revelation Tactician Kagan Ryu. It's a 6/3/5, size 3. You pay 2 gauge and put the top card of your deck into its soul. And the size of originally size 1 Skull Warriors are reduced by 1, and then it has Soul Guard. So, stat-wise, it's really efficient. It has a nice 3K crit, or 3 crit. Yeah, 3K crit. 3 crit. So it's a good, turn 1 opener of just swinging for 3. Kind of, baits out those shields. But, I mean, he's super solid. Just put him in the center just to try to have a wall. And you just call your self-destructing Skull Warriors or Yamis on the side. So he's been around for a while, and he's still just a really solid card. Next is Linkside Military Divisor Kagan Ryu. He's a 7/3/6, so it's a slightly upgraded version of original Kagan Ryu. Let me get it a little closer here because the text is a little small. The call cost is put this card on top of Skull Warrior monster on your field and pay 2 gauge. The size of all originally size 1 Skull Warriors on your field is reduced by 1, so same ability as Kagan Ryu. And when this card attacks, call up to 1 size 1 or less Skull Warrior monster from your drop zone by paying its call cost. And this ability is only once per turn. And it has a nice Penetrate and Soul Guard. So 3 crit, 7k, Penetrate is pretty good. Also, keep in mind with the call cost, it's you put this on top of a monster on your field, not top deck the soul, like the first Kagan Ryu. But it is put the top card of the deck into the soul. So let's say you have this Kagan Ryu with, let's just say, any ordinary soul. I don't care. Just, we'll just soul him, right? If you do have another 2 gauge, or if he doesn't even have the soul, you could just call right on top of him, and he actually keeps both souls below him because it calls on top. It doesn't put the monster from the field into the soul. Not that it happens too frequently, but if you do conveniently have 4 gauge and original Kagan Ryu on the field and the Revelation Tactician Kagan Ryu, or Linkside, sorry, original Kagan Ryu and Linkside Military Divisor Kagan Ryu, since this one came first, then it's a nice little combo to get, 3 soul, 6k defense wall on the field. But again, it's not always going to happen. If anything, with this card, the more common thing will be to either call back Benishojo from the drop and then just pay 2 gauge and put it on top of him, as like a wall in the center. Or you can call Setsuna, use her ability, grab back Maru, and then just pay 2 gauge and call this on top of Setsuna. Since Maru is a good sized monster, little reason to call it on top of him. And plus, when you swing and you resurrect, you can call back Maru. Like, let's say, he was in the drop, you can call back Maru to gain a free gauge, which is nice because Skull Warriors do tend to have a little bit of a gauge issue. So the fact that you can get some free gauge with Maru now with Linkside is nice. Same thing with Natsubame. You can just resurrect Natsubame for free and just get a free draw if you have if you have a decent amount of gauge and you don't need gauge right now and you just prefer the draw. That's really nice. One thing that I love to do that is just nasty in my opinion is you can call the field like this, swing with Maru, use Dark Fox's ability to destroy him. So he goes to the drop, which usually, between the soul removal and destroying the card with Dark Fox's ability, usually the monster will probably be low, if not like have no soul, or it might be gone totally. So then what you do is you can 3 penetrate the center monster, let's say, and then use his skill to bring back Maru, and then just, he gets to swing again and with Dark Fox. So it's nice to get an extra swing. You can also, if you have Kagen Ryu on the field, you can always swing with Kagen Ryu, call Setsuna, use Setsuna's skill to call back another monster, so then you actually get 2 more swings for the turn. That one isn't as prevalent, but if it's there, why not? You get 2 more swings just by Kagen Ryu's ability. So he helps just open up the board to have more options. Okay. So, and he can, extend your battle phase a little longer while still having a good amount of defense on him as well. So there's no reason to not run him. So we're moving on to spells now. And the next one is 4 Return to the Underworld. Pretty staple card for Skull Warriors ever since Season 1. The big thing with this card is I feel is being able to resurrect Hidden in Garments for only 1 gauge, since you don't have to pay that 1 life call cost. So that's nice. That's why he's kind of basically an upgrade from Evil and Heart Yami Kitsune. But obviously, one thing that does happen sometimes is if you're low on cards in hand, but you have this on the field, you always, charge and draw, use return to resurrect Demon Kid. And then you still gain that gauge back, so then you could call, where the heck is he? Benishojos from the drop, so you get 2 monsters for the price of basically 1 gauge. It kind of happens maybe once in a while, but that's, it's just there if you're kind of in a pinch and you just need to call 2 monsters. So, but return's always been a pretty staple card in the deck, so no real surprise there. Next is 4 Demon Way Arakuyos. So it's a spell. You can only cast it if you have 2 or more Skull Warriors on your field, or if 2 or more Skull Warriors on your field were destroyed during the turn. You pay 1 gauge and you draw 3, and you can only obviously cast once per turn, because if you could play multiples of these in a turn, that would just be straight stupid. So there's kind of 2 ways that go. Actually, I guess technically 3. What you can do is, if you have like Kagen Ryu on the center and it has a soul, let's say, if during your opponent's turn they destroy it once, that's 1 Skull Warrior being destroyed, and then if they swing again, that's 2 Skull Warriors, and then you can actually draw 3. It doesn't say 2 or more different Skull Warriors. It's just 2 Skull Warriors. So if the same monster gets destroyed twice, that counts. That's completely legitimate. I feel like it's something that not a lot of people think of when they're building skulls. They always assume that's kind of like 2 different, like, at least individual cards have to be destroyed. Also, that Arakuyo works well with Setsuna and Maru. Because if you charge and draw and you use Setsuna's ability to pay the 1 gauge to call Hienmaru, and Hienmaru gives you back that gauge, and then at the end of the turn when they destroy themselves, you can play the spell. You still, I mean, it's counter, so you can play it basically whenever. So at the end of your turn, you just say these 2 die, and then just play this, and you draw 3 more. So, like, literally for just playing a Setsuna and not having to spend anything more to call Hienmaru, you just get a free draw 3 at the end of the turn. So, I actually do sometimes tend to open up with that. On like turn 1, one common thing I'll do is I'll call Natsubame from hand. I'll call over Natsubame with Setsuna, pay the 1 gauge with Setsuna to call him back, and I get the free draw with, well, not free, but relatively free draw with Natsubame, and then at the end of the turn when they both destroy each other, or when they destroy, you draw 3 more. So, it's a good little bit of a cycle, and then you get some monsters in your drop for resurrection later. So the card Rakuyo is just designed for size 1 and 3 Skull Warriors. It's just the simple fact. Actually, for a long time, I actually thought that card was straight garbage. Funny enough, but I won't go into that. That was just me not getting the hint of how it actually synergizes really well. It was many years ago. So next is 3 Clear Serenities. It's a spell that just says counter, put the top 3 cards of your deck into your gauge, and you can only cast Clear Serenity once per turn. And so obviously the once per turn isn't a big deal because it's counter. You can just always play it on your opponent's turn. Like a lot of times I just play it at the end of my opponent's turn, just to at least gain through the 3 gauge, and then now it's my turn, and then if I draw into another Clear Serenity, I can play it. Also with this, since it is counter, you can always counter your opponent playing a card. So if they have a spell nullify and you really need that 3 gauge, you can counter them playing a monster or spell, and then you just counter and play this, and then they don't have the counter timing to nullify this if they wanted to. I guess the most common example is probably going to be Garble Anchor, since, Skulls kind of rely on this, and so if it gets nulled, you're kind of SOL. But, like I said, it's pretty easy workaround. And then onto the shields of the deck. First is 4 of Ninja Art Snake Gaze. It's just a spell that you pay a life and you rest a monster, and only a monster. So it's, you can't rest items or anything like that. But usually items aren't the big threat in the game right now. It's bots and chaos monsters just having multiple swings. So this fits fine. Again, it's not really a shield per se, but it at least stops them from, double, triple, God knows how many attacks. Just keeps them sitting. And then lastly, which I actually modified this, I actually changed to this from the first time I recorded the video. I originally had Art of Body replacements, but I'm running 4 Art of Shadow Stitching to see how they go, and they're actually not doing too bad. I noticed that it actually seems like that helps keep Kagan Ryu alive longer, because now, you can survive through multiple swings from a monster because it just stops all the swings. So it's actually not a bad idea. And this is why, another reason why I kind of chose Hienmaru as the buddy, is because you'll need that gauge when Kagan Ryu swings, you call back Hienmaru to gain that free gauge, and use that free gauge to use cards like this and try to keep it alive on the field. So, it's kind of just needed now. Skulls are not the fastest. They're not super slow, but they're not like, lightning fast like Chaos and Thunder Empire. So you kind of need to control the field and try to get multiple turns to try to whittle your opponent down. So between Snake Gaze and Art of Shadow Stitching, you can sort of accomplish that. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't think there's much else. If you have any questions or anything, just hit them up in the comments. And but that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward, but it is fun, and it's a little takes a little bit of thinking. But yeah, so thanks guys. Bye.